Hey, all right. Well, welcome, man. It's so good to see you here. It's good to see you guys online. We're welcoming everybody here to this morning, and we're glad that we can be at the fields to just interact with God and let God speak into our life today, and for us to open up our hearts to hear from Him and open up our hearts and express our joy and our worship to Him. All of that is so important. Before I get into closing and wrapping up our final message of this series, I do want to give you a quick announcement. I've been able to take a couple more positive steps forward in a direction that we need to be heading into. And so next week on July 5th, we're going to have a slow entry into some elementary ministry for next gen, and then on the 19th, preschool. So for elementary, that will be a 9:30 service only, and then also 5 p.m. service in Charleston. And then preschool, we'll roll that out a few weeks later. We wanted to take little baby steps forward in a really good direction. We realize the importance of helping our kids grow, and if you're comfortable and they're comfortable and we're ready to do that, starting next weekend on July 5th, 9:30 a.m. in Mattoon is the only service, 5 p.m. in Charleston. We will have elementary available. It will have an RSVP system as well, because we want to know how many kiddos would be in a room, and we're going to, again, have all a safe and secure environment. So we have to make sure that we have the right amount of space for the amount of kids and things like that. So we will just take these little steps forward, but we are going to get there. It takes little baby steps to get to where we want to be. So this is another great step forward for us, is heading toward next gen ministry. And one little step will be elementary, 9:30 service. So we're excited about that. As I wrap up today's teaching, we're on this series called All the Feels. And that's all the emotions, everything that God's put us on, the way we feel. And if you know social media, conversations at your house, watching just the news, there's a lot of emotions. You've been living under a rock if you're not aware of all the emotions going on right now in our society. Thing is God's given us all these emotions. Like we are built and designed, the DNA inside of us is to have emotions, high and low. But we have to know how to respond to them and how to live these out in a godly way, and to understand the way God has shaped us and designed us. So we've talked about anger. We've talked about restoring the joy of the Lord in our life, even in the midst of chaos. You can go back and watch those and listen to those. But what we really want to do today, as I wrap up, is the feeling of disgust. Feeling disgusted. I know there's parts of us like we understand feeling disgusted. Other words for that would be like feeling great disapproval of something, or feeling completely appalled at something, or maybe even nauseated, or something is cringeworthy, or it just horrifies you, or it's just so repulsive. In the movie Inside Out, we shared a clip of this a few weeks ago, but it's a movie really designed to help kids understand all the emotions and the feelings going on their inside. And one of those feelings in our lives is disgust. So let's watch and let's meet disgust.
Sometimes life gets a little dirty. That's when disgust takes over. This is disgust. Whether advising on your social life or on life's little messes, disgust is there to, well, hold on.
Disgust. Okay, so we all get disgusted. Let me read you the Pixar bio of disgust, the character disgust. Disgust, she's highly opinionated, extremely honest, and she prevents Riley, that's the character in the show, from getting poisoned both physically and socially. She keeps a careful eye on the people, places, and things that Riley comes in contact with, whether that's broccoli or whether that's last year's fashion trends. Disgust always has the best of intentions and refuses to lower her standards. I think that's really interesting, because we need an honesty going on inside of our life that prevents us from getting poisoned, whether that is physically or socially. But we also want to make sure that we're not lowering our standards from what may have been disgusting a while ago no longer seems disgusting anymore. So there's different kinds of disgust, and one's physical disgust. That's the one that's probably the most common. That's the That's the when you go and you order your food and you have French fries and you take the ketchup and you go to put ketchup on it and it's just ketchup spit. That watery, I just called that ketchup spit. Like I claim that word, okay? So ketchup spit. Or you go and you eat a bowl of cereal, but the bowl of cereal has been sitting on the kitchen counter for 2 days and you still eat it. Yeah, that's disgusting. Maybe it's just a smell that triggers something inside of you. You're like, oh, that's gross. Or maybe you like fishing, but you don't want to touch worms and you don't want to touch fish. So I don't know why you like fishing, or the sight of blood or something like that. When we were in Tanzania last spring, so we got a little bit of a taste of some people's disgustometer went off. And so we'd been out and ministering in this village, these Maasai tribe, and we come home for dinner, and a Maasai tribesman is going to prepare us a meal that night. And so we show up, we walk around in this big grassy area, and there's the Maasai tribesman, and this is what he has for us for dinner. That's right, it's just the goat, and it was still alive. And some of our team members are like, what's going to go on here? And so we gave our team permission. If you want to step aside, you can. But he is going to give us a complete Maasai meal of knowing how to kill the goat, cook the goat over an open fire and everything. And so some stepped away, some didn't. I had my phone out. I was like, okay, I got to watch this for a minute. You got to document the missions trip. But so he's literally preparing the meal, and he kills the goat. He opens the goat up, and then he grabs the heart, and he says, would you guys like to taste this? And some of my team's leaning forward. I'm like, no, none of us who's going to be getting back on an airplane is going to be eating anything raw inside. And so he goes, okay. And we're like, So we're like, okay, that was kind of disgusting. That's disgust. That's physical disgust. Like when we think about that, we're like, something inside of you kind of cringes up, and because of your exposures, you've been able to realize something's not right there. That's not like something inside of you is saying, danger, 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 don't do that. So we understand the physical disgust, but as Christians, listen, as people who've decided to follow Jesus, we invite God into our lives. He lives inside of us. The Holy Spirit lives inside of us. So now there should be a spiritual trigger that goes off when something is contrary to God. Something that is disgusting in the sight of God, that is unholy. It's what we call sin. There's something inside of us. There should be this trigger because sin is so opposite of who God is. Listen to me, listen clearly. Sin should disgust our soul. It should. Sin should disgust our soul. Let me say it this way. Evil is contrary to the nature of God. Thus, we should have a spiritual disgust that repels us away from sin and evil. When the Holy Spirit lives inside of us, if evil is contrary to the nature of God, yet God lives inside of us, there should be a spiritual disgust, a trigger mechanism spiritually goes off that this isn't right and this isn't good. We should have that feeling. God should put that in us so we know, that is evil and contrary to God. How does that work? It's the work of the Holy Spirit. When you invite the Holy Spirit to live inside of you and to work inside of you, the biblical, the churchy word is called conviction. The Holy Spirit should convict you of your sin. The Holy Spirit should convict us that this is not godly. That is the Holy Spirit trigger inside of us that should bring about this disgust that, that is not holy, righteous, or godly. Jesus is telling the disciples, I'm going to be leaving, but I'm going to send you the Holy Spirit. And he says, you don't have to figure out what's right and wrong on your own. We're going to help you with that. So let's take a look at this. He writes, Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and he says, but in fact, it's best for you that I go away. He's going back to the Father in heaven. Because if I don't, the advocate, we taught on this a few weeks ago, the advocate is the word for the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit then won't come. If I do go away, then I will send him, the helper, the advocate, to you. What is he going to do? And when he comes, when the Holy Spirit comes, he will convict the world of its sin and of God's righteousness and of the coming judgment. And one of the things that the Holy Spirit does when he lives inside of us is he convicts us of the sin. That is the disgust going off. That is the trigger of this is not right. Something's wrong here. And we need to understand that that is a godly feeling put into your life that we should be aware of and in tune with. But we have to be in tune with the voice of the Holy Spirit in our life so we can be disgusted at things that are contrary to God. And these things that's called sin. Sin is what's so opposite of God. Unholiness. What do we need to know about sin? A couple things. Number one would be this. Sin divides us against God. There's this tug of war for our soul. There's this tug of war going on, and it divides us. Our loyalty and our allegiance is divided. This is what it says in James. James writes about this, and he says, come close to God, and God will come close to you. That in itself is a magnificent sentence. When we draw near to God, God draws near to us. And now there's this closeness. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts. So make sure that we are living a life that is holy and pure and clean. For your loyalty is divided between God and the world. He goes on to says, let there be tears for what you've done. Let there be sorrow and deep grief. Let there be sadness instead of laughter and gloom instead of joy. He's saying we should actually be mourning the sin that's in us and that we're participating in and that we allow. Not laughing about it and not writing it off and not just, not my problem. He says that it should stir us up. It should get us sick. Because if the Holy Spirit lives inside of us, we should be disgusted when there is sin in our lives or around our lives. And sin divides us from God. If you're involved in that sinful activity, you need to know that there's this, you cannot serve both masters. It divides us. It also does this. I want you to know that sin brings sorrow to God's heart. So it's not just I got to do the right thing, not the wrong thing. We need to know this grieves the Spirit of God. When we sin, he grieves. And so if we have relationship with God, we don't want to bring sorrow. I don't want to bring sorrow to my family for anything I do, and I don't want to bring sorrow to God. And a lot of times we don't realize that. In fact, Paul talks about this to the church in Ephesus. He writes this letter to Ephesus in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 30, and he says, do not bring sorrow to God's Holy Spirit by the way you live. Remember, he's identified you as his own, guaranteeing that you will be saved on the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness. And then he starts mentioning these things that could be in our life. Bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. He doesn't even mention murder. He's like bitterness, rage, harsh words, slander, and then all the other evil behavior. He said this bitterness brings sorrow to God's heart. Anger, slander, harsh words toward others. That's what he mentions as what brings sorrow and what grieves the Holy Spirit. So I need to live a life knowing I am personally affecting how God feels by the way I live. Come on, parents, we know the same thing. If our kids do something and they mess up and they get themselves in trouble, we have this ache inside of us that I can't believe my son or my daughter did that. And now they're punished or they got in trouble at school or they're hurt or something happened. And we feel it too. We empathize for our kids who themselves got in trouble. And so God is feeling the sin in our life because it grieves his spirit. And the other thing sin does is we need to know that it's just flat out rebellion against God. And so it's actually targeted toward him. David brings this out. King David, he made massive, sinful decisions of adultery and orchestrated murder. But you would have said that sin affects somebody else's family or marriage or that person's life or their kids. And we would say the sin has really hurt those people. But look how David says this. He says, against you and only you have I sinned. I have done evil, what is in your sight. It is against God when we sin. It is a rebellious act against him. Not just something bad, not something bad for your family or for your life or for your spiritual sake. It is literally rebellious toward him. And it says, you will be proved right in what you say, and your judgment against me is just. But against you and only you have I sinned. And David he comes to that conclusion that my sin is in rebellious towards God. It is me flat out rejecting God. It's a slap in the face to God. It's rebellion. It's rebellion. The problem is a lot of us, we just don't get disgusted by sin anymore. Whether it's the slippery slope or we just get, it's casual, it's common, and we're calloused. And we don't get disgusted by it anymore. I think there's 3 pretty common reasons why we, our friends, our nation, our world does not get disgusted by sin anymore. And that feeling of disgust has kind of just went away. Number 1 would be this, is that we are in denial. Well, I don't sin. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't cross the line. I didn't do it. They might be doing it, but I didn't do it. And they're denying that it's sin. They're like, oh, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything wrong. And so when we just kind of chalk it up to, I don't do anything wrong, all of a sudden, whatever's wrong doesn't even matter anymore. Like, it's not that big of a deal, and I'm not involved in it, so I'm just going to let it go. I didn't do it. I'm not a part of it. Or maybe you did it and you're still lying to someone else saying, I don't do that. I don't live that I don't have those kind of thoughts. I don't have that kind of addiction. I don't cross the line. And you're denying yourself. You've deceived yourself. You're in denial. Or the second one is that we are indifferent. Indifferent is it just doesn't, we've become so relaxed that all of a sudden we're like, that's not really that big of a deal. Nobody's perfect. Have you seen what those other people do? I mean, I might not be great, but if you look over there, I'm actually a pretty decent guy. If you look at the other people, and all of a sudden we just get so indifferent and just like, oh, nobody's perfect. Everybody messes up, so we can all have our own little issues. And we become indifferent and comfortable, and we're just like, not a big deal. Or another reason that we don't feel disgust is we just get defended. We're in defense. We're like, it's not wrong. Prove to me it's wrong. That Bible's so old, there's no way that sentence in the Bible has anything to do with the way I'm living right now. I'm not doing anything wrong. Quit judging me. Don't judge me just because you think what you think is right and what I'm doing is wrong. And we start getting defensive, and we're offended, and we almost celebrate. I'm going to do what I want to do. It feels good, and it's none of your business what I do when nobody else is watching, or I'm not hurting you, so just leave me alone. I like it. And so then we don't feel the disgust of sin because we're so busy defending it. And we have to make sure that we're not fighting for our freedom to do what we want to do so much that the Holy Spirit can no longer speak to us and bring out the disgust that what we're doing, what we're saying, or what we're feeling is actually very offensive to God. And it's contrary to God. So those are some of the reasons we're either denial, we're indifferent, or we're defending it. What if we asked a different question, though? What if we moved forward and said, what if we moved from denial, indifference, and defensiveness to a disgust of sin? What would it look like for us to move into a season or a lifestyle of we are disgusted in sin? Our lives would be attracted to the goodness and the righteousness of God. We would slowly just align ourselves more with God if we would truly get disgusted by sin. We would get closer to Him, and the goodness of God would start to be evident in our lives. If we would distance ourselves from sin and draw in closer to God, it would change our life. It really would. We would see that we are heading back on a path of righteousness in the way God designed us, in living not just in his will, but in alignment with the DNA that he's designed us to live. Like we are to be a holy people. But we've drifted off course, whether we are denying it or indifferent or we're defending it. If you think back, and I was thinking about how we have just become desensitized to the sin around us. We're really callous to it. It just doesn't affect us anymore. When I was growing up, I'm going to sound like an old person right now. The TV shows I used to watch didn't show those kind of things, didn't talk about those things, and didn't say those things. But the reality is our culture has really shifted over a period of time that what was acceptable in media, whether that was 10 years ago or 40 years ago, today what you can watch is just radically different. And it's the same thing with take video games. When I was playing video games, the most violent thing was this little circle called Pac-Man eating dots. And then every once in a while I'd come across a ghost and he'd eat the ghost and boop, 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 and then he'd go get powered up and he could do everything. And like that was it, and then, there wasn't cussing on Atari. But we fast forward to games today and they're rated mature, but we have 10-year-olds playing games that are rated mature that have a lot of cussing and blood and gore and they devalue humanity. And we just shrug our shoulders and go, yeah, that video games have changed. And so what happens is we've been desensitized in media and morality and entertainment that we no longer feel the disgust of God with the world around us. We've lived in it so much that we put ourselves right into the middle of it, that the disgust of the world no longer disgusts us. We don't see it as disgusting. We're desensitized. Therefore, we're calloused. And our hearts are calloused to the point that we're struggling hearing the voice of the Holy Spirit saying, that is contrary to me. That is not you. You are a child of God. Distance yourself from that. We need to hear that voice. We need to hear that voice. How can we hear that voice? What can we do since we've lost our own disgust for sin? There's 3 areas that we can pray. If you're taking notes, write these down. Number 1 would be this: pray to be disgusted by what tempts you. We need to start every day praying for what tempts us. If you struggle in an area that is contrary to God, pray that your stomach will be sick over it, that you will be disgusted by that activity, that language, what you watch, what you do, that attitude you have toward people. We'll pray that we are disgusted by that because it's Satan that is tempting us away from the ways of God. Pray that you are disgusted when you are being tempted. Pray that the Holy Spirit would make you sick when the sin is nearby. The second thing you could pray is ask the Lord to help you be angry at the devil. I want us to hear this today. My mother-in-law, Diane, would say it all the time: wrong enemy. Sometimes we get mad at people, we get mad at situations, we get mad at policy, we get mad at government, we get mad at a lot of things. But what we need to do is pray that there would be this anger that well up inside of me at the devil, not at people. Can we be reminded that God created every single person on this planet? Doesn't matter what color they are, doesn't matter what language they speak, doesn't matter what geographical region of the world they live in, doesn't matter how much money is in their bank account. God created people. Who we need to be angry at is Satan, who is trying to kill, steal, and destroy. He wants to destroy relationships. He wants to destroy people. He wants to destroy futures. And so what I want to do is be angry at what the devil is doing, not angry at the people that the devil has messed up. I want to be angry at his schemes. I need there to be this holy anger towards Satan, who is still trying to kill, steal, and destroy. And I should hate that. We need to have a healthy anger, a holy anger toward the devil, not toward people, not toward decisions people are making, We need to be angry at Satan, not at people who've been led astray. Lastly is I need to pray to love what is good. You see that I need to have a pure heart, and I need to pursue a pure heart, and you need to pursue a pure heart. And the only way to pursue a pure heart is to pursue and to crave, to have a desire for the goodness of God. We need to understand that everything in me should long for what is good. I should have a craving inside of me every day to wake up and go, I want something good from God in my life. And I need that desire to be increased. So I need to pray to love what is good. Lord, stir something up within me to love what is godly, to love what is good. I need to want that every day. I need God to put a desire in my heart that is so strong for Him and His goodness that that's all I need. And I can say, He is enough. We need to long for Him and His goodness. Because when you go after Him, your heart will be transformed from tainted to pure and holy. We've got to pray to love what is good. We need to ask the Lord, increase my desire for you. You see, some of us come into the room and we've been far from God. Or we've come into the room and we've drifted away. Or maybe we've never had a relationship with God. But I'm going to tell you, for you and I to have that feeling of disgust that's triggered by the Holy Spirit, then we need the Holy Spirit of God to live inside of us so we can start communicating. God can speak to me. I can respond the right way. But I have to have God living inside of me. And maybe we're not feeling disgusted by the sin around us because we have turned off the voice of the Lord. Or maybe we've never invited Him into our life. Let's start there. If today you need to invite Jesus into your life so He can begin to guide you, shape you, and direct you, then you just whisper a prayer that says, Lord, come in. I invite you in. I want you to know that we need God in our lives so we can hear His voice, so we can feel the disgust of the sin around us. It's through Him. It's not through us. It's through Him. So our first step is inviting God to speak back into our life. Be real in our life. Have a real, authentic relationship with God so when we're around something poisonous or danger, He goes, hey, Travis, get away from that. Get away from that. Keep your distance on that one.